Last Saturday, scattered protests broke out around Iran to commemorate the first anniversary of the death of Mahsa Amini, a 22-year-old woman who died in police custody. She had been detained for allegedly not wearing her headscarf properly. The protests in the immediate aftermath of Amini's death rocked Iran. They were brutally suppressed and eventually died out. In more recent months, Iran has restarted foot patrols to enforce the country's strict dress code for women. Most importantly, perhaps, the headscarf requirement. When I sat down with Iran's President Ibrahim Raisi on Tuesday, I wanted to understand why his government remained so adamant about the need for women to cover their heads. It's around a year ago that there were those demonstrations across Iran that caused a great deal of internal strife. The Iranian government often likes to say this was small protests, but if you're pardoning 22,000 and you're still imprisoning many, many more, it suggests these were large. What I want to ask you is, at the heart of it is this issue of the hijab, about whether women should have their heads covered. And I grew up as a Muslim in India. I've traveled all over the Muslim world. Hundreds of millions of Muslims do not believe that this is something women should be told to do. There are dozens of Islamic countries where the governments are very pious and believe in Islam, and they are devoted, and they don't believe this. They believe women should have the choice and the right to wear whatever they want and not have a patriarchal system tell them what to do. Are all these hundreds of millions, maybe over 1 billion Muslims, wrong, and only the Islamic Republic of Iran is right?
What occurred during the days that you spoke of earlier, that was the presence of a few, not the presence of the people. The people of Iran did not support in any way those that rioted in the streets of Iran. The people's lack of support defeated their plans. There were some who were fooled. There were others who committed murder, conducted serious crimes. But what occurred last year was a war conducted in the media by the enemy. I don't want to name TV networks or news networks, but networks who were headquartered in the 3 European countries and in the United States of America, who broadcast news 24 hours a day. They openly teach tactics of terror. So they conduct instructional steps on how to build a cocktail Molotov. This is one of the facets of animosity of the United States of America towards the Islamic Republic of Iran, as well as that of certain European countries towards Iran. It's not hijab that matters for them. It's not the head coverings that matter for them. It's not women's rights. It's not nuclear issues. It's not human rights. Because there are countries such as the Zionist regime. Is the Zionist regime armed to the teeth with nuclear warheads or no? Why doesn't a single voice come out of the United States in protest to that? Why doesn't a voice come out of any of the European countries in protest to that?
But the hijab matters to Iranian women. I've talked to them. I've been to Tehran. It does matter to them. They believe it is an infringement on their rights.
But the fundamental issue is that today in the Islamic Republic, hijab is a law. And when an issue becomes part of the law, then everyone must adhere to the law. So it's the same the world over. And now that with regard to adherence to the laws, in reality, the Americans and certain European countries are only seeking to cause a bipolar situation in our society. So they conduct their work in this fashion, always. They thought Iran is one of those societies in which they can create two different opposing poles, in which women's and the gender issues become against set against hijab. But rest assured that through the use of these tools, they will not succeed. The people of Iran are enlightened, are people of faith, are spiritual people, and they deeply understand that the United States of America and three European countries don't care about their rights, their hijab, but a life of respect for women has existed for hundreds and hundreds of years in Iran. It's not a development that we have observed in the past few decades.
After our interview, Iran's parliament approved a bill for a 3-year trial period that gets even stricter on enforcing its dress code, including prison terms of up to 10 years for violations. A panel of experts appointed by the UN described the bill as gender apartheid. The bill still needs to be ratified by Iran's Guardian Council. Next on GPS, the world's worries about Iran's nuclear program increased again this month. I asked President Raisi about it when we come back.
This is your season to smile.
Iran is at the center of many controversies, but perhaps the most alarming is its nuclear progress. Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Mark Milley, said earlier this year that Tehran could have fissile material for a bomb in less than 2 weeks and a nuclear weapon just a few months later. Last weekend, the IAEA said Iran has decided to bar several of its inspectors. Tehran has now removed, the technical term is de-designated, about 1/3 of the agency's most experienced inspectors who were working in Iran. The IAEA director condemned the act and said it severely affects the agency's ability to do its work. He asked Tehran to reconsider. Here's more of my interview with President Raisi. Let me ask you about the issues that the IAEA has raised about Iran recently. Would it be possible to get the IAEA inspectors to the point where they have enough people there who can actually inspect, or is your intention to make it impossible for the IAEA to function in Iran?
Well, you see, if our intention was for the IAEA not to be able to conduct inspections, we would have said so clearly. However, from the very beginning, our aim was to collaborate and cooperate with the IAEA. And they are fully aware of this within the IAEA, that we have cooperated fully. And this cooperation takes place in two ways. In various ways. One, via installation of cameras that record in real time the activities that take place. Secondly, are the inspectors who come there and oversee the nuclear activities in Iran. And in the time that has elapsed thus far, since the agreement, 15 different times the IAEA has said and certified that there are no digressions into any type of Iran's nuclear activity, and that it remains purely for civilian and peaceful purposes. And we have announced time and time again that the use of nuclear weapons, the use of weapons of mass destruction in general, do not have a place. Why? Because we don't believe in it, nor do we have a need for it. However, what we believe in, given in particular the fatwa issued by His Eminence the Supreme Leader, because these are weapons of mass destructions and they can lead to the death of many innocent lives throughout the world, then it is haram, not religiously allowed to develop or use these weapons. We have, the Islamic Republic of Iran hasn't said we do not wish any inspectors to be here. We have said what these three countries, what has been said by the IAEA is that we have certain considerations vis-a-vis individuals from these three countries. Their trust is under a shadow of doubt.
Well, you have de-designated all American inspectors, of course. Now you are de-designating, which means essentially firing all the French and the German and the British ones. And the IAEA says this will cripple its ability to do the inspections. The IAEA does say there are many unanswered questions, and I want to raise them because those are the very questions that these three countries asked that you referred to. And the question is essentially around two sites which were never declared by Iran as nuclear sites, and yet the IAEA believes that there are traces of uranium there. Why would you not answer that question? Were those sites part of a uranium enrichment facility, and if so, why were they never declared?
سوالاتی هم که تاکنون داشتن توسط سازمان انرژی اتمی پاسخ داده شده.
All of their questions have been answered. Whether there were questions that were in any given specific time frame or those that are generally posed. Each time when we responded to these questions, we did so officially in official meetings with IAEA officials, and they were clarified. Any unanswered questions or ambiguities were clarified, so the misunderstandings that or lack of goodwill that exist, they're not founded in reality. They're simply allegations.
I have to say the IAEA does say that these are important questions that have not been answered relating to these two sites. So they regard these as serious unanswered questions. But let me ask you one that's very simple. Iran is the only country that has only a civilian program, as you claim it is, that enriches to the level you enrich, to 60% and higher. Why are you enriching to these high numbers? Doesn't that raise people's suspicions?
ببینید
You see,
این اقدام ایران
this action
در
of the Islamic
مقابل
Republic of
نقض
Iran
تعهدات و پیمان‌هایی است که از
against
جانب
the breaking of
امریکا و
commitments
سه کشور اروپایی اتفاق
and the
افتاده.
three European countries
ما که
vis-a-vis
ابتدا
the
دنبال
reached
غنیسازی
accord.
60% نرفتیم.
In the beginning, we were not seeking
اونها نقض
60%
پیمان
levels
کردن.
of enrichment. They trampled upon their
طبق اعتراف
commitments
آژانس
according
این
to
کاری که
multiple
جمهوری اسلامی کرد در
IAEA
پاسخ به
certifications. What the
نقض
Islamic
پیمان‌هایی بود که
Republic of Iran
بعدها
did
انجام
was in
دادن
response to a breaking of commitment of
و
the signatories
لکن
to the
اعلام هم
agreement.
شد
And it
رسما که
was
این کار
officially announced that the
اقدامی که
action
جمهوری
that we
اسلامی ایران داره
intend to
انجام
take
میده
is not
اصلا برای
intended to
رفتن به
reach
طرف سلاح
nuclear
هسته‌ای نیست
weapons of any type
بلکه
or a military dimension of
پاسخی است
any
به
type, but it is
رفتارهای
a
غیر
response
متحدانه
for
اروپایی است
the lack of commitment demonstrated by the
هر وقت اونها
Europeans.
به
And
تعهداتشون
should
برگردن
they at any
حتما
time
میبینید که
return
جمهوری
to a
اسلامی
fulfillment of their
همچنان که تا
commitments,
حدودی
rest
به
assured and have no
تعهداتش
doubt
عمل
that the
کرده
Islamic
در ضمن
Republic, as it
بیان
has done in the
آژانس
past, will fully adhere to her commitments.
Next on GPS, I asked President Raisi about warming relations between some of Iran's Arab neighbors and Israel. How does he feel about this trend?
My most important kitchen tool? My brain.
The great regional issue going on in the Middle East right now is, of course, what has been started with the Abraham Accords, the normalization of relations between some Gulf states and Israel. An Arab diplomat, a friend of mine, said, the Iranians have managed to achieve the impossible, which is they have brought Israel and the Arabs together against them. Isn't the Abraham Accords fundamentally a failure of Iran's foreign policy? Because here you have Israel and countries that would not even recognize it, would not even talk to it, coming together, largely because they worry about Iran's influence in the region, which they see as malevolent.
این کار امریکایی‌ها بود که دست
This was a job done by the Americans to take the hands of the Israelis and put that squarely in the hands of certain Arab countries. This doesn't equal the acceptance of those nations, of those people. People in those countries, in those Persian Gulf Arab countries, have a great deal of hate for the Israeli actions. And this was only obtained under American pressure. And the frame of thought of the Americans was that they are somehow creating security for the Zionist regime, whereas normalization of certain countries with Israel does not buy security or bring about security for the Zionist regime, because both the Zionist regime is facing internal strife and difficulties, and it is hated outside, whether by countries that are of Muslim faith or otherwise. Across the world today, know that the Zionist regime is the most hated for crimes against humanity, against human beings, and the trampling upon of many agreements that it should have adhered to thus far. And it is hated for that. So this was the action undertaken by the Americans. On one side, the Americans did this. On the other side, they started to promote a phobia about Iran, an unfounded fear in the hearts of the neighboring countries about Iran, so that when they wish to establish contact with Iran or have an approach or rapprochement, or conduct economic activities with Iran, they see that these are fears created by the Americans. So this normalization will see no success, just like in previous cases. And this is not a solution for the Zionist regime. After 7.5 decades, they must go back to the principle founded in giving the rights to the Palestinian people that they are owed, what is rightfully theirs. The path must start from that point of origin. Instead of addressing the core issue, they are trying to bring about a forced normalization, which cannot help the Zionist regime in any way, shape, or form, other than to put everyone in a position where even the people of these nations that you touched upon earlier, they see that establishment of normalization or relationship as a betrayal of their principles and values. So after 75 years, these different avenues pursued by the United States of America have never responded, have never yielded the desired fruit.
You say that Israel is, after 75 years, has not solved its problems and is in trouble. But when I look at Israel, it seems to have become one of the richest countries in the region. It is now almost an industrial country by per capita GDP. It has built an extraordinary technology sector. And despite the Palestinian problem, they have been able to normalize relations with many Arab countries. Increasingly, it seems possible that they will normalize relations with Saudi Arabia. Meanwhile, Iran is isolated. Your GDP growth has been very poor over the last 30 years. A country that used to be one of the richest countries in the region now looks backward in comparison. Iran seems more isolated. Is it worth the price you have paid to have taken all these positions that you will have taken? It feels like for the Iranian people, they have paid a heavy price in terms of lack of development.
With the Islamic Revolution, we gave a loud and clear announcement that we will not go under the hegemony of the West or that of America. We wish to be an independent country. We wish to have relations with all countries. But they sought only hegemony. Now, what conditions are in the region? Let's look at it. In the situation brought about by the Americans in Syria, was Syria successful or America? Certainly Syria. In Afghanistan, were the people of Afghanistan successful or the United States of America? Certainly the people of Afghanistan. In Iraq, were the Iraqis successful or the United States of America? Certainly the Iraqis. Now, where in the region has America been successful? You cannot see an example of her success anywhere in the region. The difference and the comparison between Iran, Western countries, and the Americans, Iran has been the one who has succeeded. Now, America also, it's important to keep in mind that wanted for Iran to become isolated. That did not occur. Is the entire world comprised of 3 European countries and the United States of America? The world has almost 200 different independent countries. We have relations with a great many of them, most of them. Is today's world scenario showing you that American power is precipitating or that of Iran? We believe that it's certainly that of the United States of America, and Iran's position is being strengthened by the day.
Mr. President, our time is up, and I thank you for allowing the world to hear your views on a range of issues.
I also thank you.
Next on GPS, there is